The Belarusian armed forces are concentrating troops along Ukraine's border in the north of Kiev, which is causing some worry. We'll talk about this and try to put it into some perspective. What can be expected there? What is the real threat? We'll also talk about the massive Russian airstrike against Ukrainian targets all over Ukraine. And we'll obviously also talk about the developments along the front line in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Hello and welcome. There's been additional Ukrainian strikes. Here we have the satellite pictures showing the before and after of a Voronezh ammunition depot that was hit by the Ukrainians. And as you can see, the area has changed quite visibly. The exact amount of damage is unclear, but according to reports that in that place there were both glide bombs as well as artillery munition and also missiles for artillery being stored there. The Proletarsk oil depot is still burning after 8 days or 9 days. The Russians have basically given up to trying to seriously quell the fire. They are just containing it as of now. That seems to be the case, so we'll probably talk about it for quite a few more days until the fire has stopped by itself. But that's not all, because the oil refinery in Omsk also has caught fire. Damage is after an explosion, the fire has broken out. So far, I have not seen a claim that it was a Ukrainian drone, but that doesn't mean it wasn't, so I simply do not have any additional informations. The Ukrainian side have now introduced and publicly presented their new drone, the Palyanitsia. This is the design that they show. Basically a rocket, the form of a rocket with two wings. While they call it a rocket, they talk about a jet engine, so it has a regular jet engine that is being used in this. This is their development during the war that was now being used for strikes in the Russian rear. Obviously, by using a jet engine, it has a higher speed and thus is more difficult to intercept, and that led to the recent successes of the Ukrainians. The Russians, on the other hand, have done a massive airstrike against Ukraine, one of the big ones that was to be expected after Ukraine entered the Kursk region. We talked about it in the past, as the Russians like to do some, in quotation mark, retaliation strikes after some Ukrainian successes. In the end, it doesn't matter much, because the missiles and the cruise missiles, the drones were meant for Ukraine anyways. They would have been shot there anyways. So now they have fired over 100 missiles and cruise missiles. They also used over 100 Shahid drones against Ukraine, which caused significant damage all over the country. We have here a video showing that the hydropower plant in Kiev was also hit. To which extent the damage will impede further future operations is unclear as of now. The Russians have also attacked a hotel in Kramatorsk that is often being used by journalists, and a security advisor for Reuters has died in the attack here. The two more journalists were injured in the attack, and this caused international outrage, as the claim is the Russians know that this is being used by journalists. Russian bloggers, Russian mill bloggers, are claiming that this is where mercenaries are being stationed. So this is their claim for to claim this is their claim why it was legal. Let's go to the developments along the front line. We'll talk about Kursk region first. Zelensky said that they gained an additional 3 kilometers, 2 additional settlements. I cannot say where. I do not see the map having moved in any significant way. If we look here at Petrenko's map, a pro-Ukrainian mill blogger, he also does not indicate that anything has changed in favor of the Ukrainians. So I simply cannot confirm that they gained additional ground. We do know that the Ukrainians are still north of Ruskoye Perechnoye. This is visually confirmed, but this was here at this point. But as you can see, this is already in the gray zone. So not that doesn't indicate solid control. This just shows where neither side has solid control. This doesn't mean that this is a fresh advance. The Ukrainians might have still been there. Still, the area was an area where the Ukrainians operated before. The Russians, meanwhile, are confirming that that there were actually Russian soldiers encircled in Malaya Loknia. This is here. We talked about it a while ago that the Ukrainians managed to pass Ruskoye Perechnoye, and the Russians said that the Ukrainians attacked here to the north of Malaya Loknia, and this led to an encirclement in this area in between. Now the Russians are saying that the soldiers of the 810th Naval Brigade managed to fight through and allow them to retreat. At least that's what I see from the article. It would mean that soldiers, that they have retreated. This is not a clear indication whether Malaya Loknia is now under Ukrainian control. It might have been that those soldiers that had been encircled before managed to retreat, but the 810th have now taken their positions. I do not see solid claims or even proof that Malaya Loknia is now under Ukrainian control, so the area there seems to be unchanged. All we do know is that it was true, Russians were actually encircled here. We go to the south of the front line here at Borki, and there we have a visual evidence of the Ukrainians still operating in the south of Borki. So the Russian claims that they retook the town are definitely wrong. The Ukrainians are inside of it, but that doesn't mean they control the whole of it. The video shows an FPV drone attack that could have come from somewhere else, that could have come from the north of the town, the north of the town is now under Russian control. So the situation is unclear, but we do know that the Ukrainians are still in Borki. On the northern front line, some attacks being reported. The Ukrainians claim that they managed to intercept some supply runs to the encircled troops in the Vovchansk plant that are encircled there for 2 months now, but are being supplied by drones, at least according to Ukrainian claims. But nothing has changed along the front line, and I have nothing on the eastern front north of the Seversky Donetsk either. So nothing has changed along here that I can confirm over the last 2 days. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we do have changes, not from Chasiv Yar, but from the area where the Ukrainians were somewhat successful in their counter-offensive. And there, the Russians are now north of Andrivka. They have been spotted north of Andrivka, and this is here. We've seen the Russians roughly a month and a half ago in this area. We've seen them here. We've seen them here, we've seen them here, and we've seen them here in the past 2 months, roughly. This was fresh. Klishivka is definitely no longer under Ukrainian control. A significant part of it is probably under solid Russian control. And as we've seen them march south in the past, this seems to be likely that this was an advance along the road here and not across the river here and across the railroad tracks from the east, but this means that Andrivka is now being threatened from the north as well, while the Russians managed to extend their area of control around Klishivka. Further south, the Russians have crossed the canal here at Osarianivka. We have a geolocation of this as well. This is here at this point. Directly south should be roughly here. Again, not a major change, but obviously the canal is some kind of obstacle, and with the Russians having crossed it, this might allow them to advance further in the western direction from this area here, while they were advancing in Drushba as well. They are now coming from the eastern flank as well. In Toretsk itself, the Russians keep advancing as well. The Russian gains are continuing. We have them now here. This was an area that was recently captured. We have it south now. So this area here, as you can see, it's already marked. I think one was here and the other one should have been more or less here. They keep pushing towards the west. They have taken the high rises here over the past couple of days and are now pushing into Donetsk itself. Further south, we have no change. This situation is still unclear, as I said in the past. Now, while the deep state map, which is pro-Ukrainian, is indicating that there's an encirclement here of Ukrainian troops, there are other pro-Ukrainian sources claiming that this is not the truth. There are even Russians that claim that it's not the truth. We'll have to see if something turns out. I'm a little bit confused of this situation, but I can't solve it for you. I see that this looks like an encirclement, and it might be, but as of now, I can't confirm it. At Avdiivka, the Russians keep advancing here in the area of Novotoretsk. They gained over the past couple of days roughly this area here and this area here. So they consolidate their positions along the reservoir here and march towards the west, now threatening directly Novotoretsk. To the west of it, we have the Russians advancing in Novorodivka, and we have to say the Ukrainians are almost being routed in here if we see the advances. This is built-up area, some of it with high rises, so that should give the Ukrainians better protection. But within, I think, 6 days, the Russians have not just entered the town, but have already marched through it. Almost crossed it. They have gained 1.6 kilometers at most in the area, and as you can see, their front positions are only away a few hundred meters, 380, let's say 400 meters from the end of town towards the west. Novorodivka is under massive pressure, and the Ukrainians are being forced back almost daily here in this area. South of it, the Russians are extending their bridgehead into or their positions into the they have pushed into the Ukrainian lines. They gained additional ground close to Marinivka. This is here. This here is Marinivka. Here, we have a geolocation of them being down here at this border. So you see Marinivka. Here is Novorodivka. They reached this point, but a very fresh geolocation that came in right before I started recording shows them already further south, now in Mikhailivka, here in the industrial area, or I think that's probably a mine in the mining area. So the Russians have already reached roughly this position here. They are advancing towards the south here as well, extending their positions. Then we have them advancing in the areas of Kalinove. Here they also gained roughly this, and they gained I think here something, and we can see that the positions here are being taken over by the Russians. This was unsurprising. We talked about it in the past. The Ukrainian position in here was untenable in the long run. It was clear that the Ukrainians would withdraw along these positions, and this is in progress right now to prevent them from being cut off while the Russians are advancing from the north and would endanger Ukrainian positions in here. Not much of a surprise here. So the Russians keep advancing in the Pokrovsk area. They are about to punch through Novorodivka. They have reached the outskirts here of there's another bigger city here in the way, and Pokrovsk is only a few kilometers away from the Russian lines as of now. As you can see, 10 kilometers or less, depending on where you draw the line. The situation there remains critical. Nothing has changed in the overall picture. Further south, I do not have any change until we come to Konstantinivka. Here the Russians managed to advance further to the west. They have reached this industrial area, which it probably is, or agricultural area, and they gained the tree lines to the south of it. So roughly all of this here is now in Russian hands as well. The Russians have also taken the fortification line here at the, it's here at the entrance to Vodiane to the east. We have a geolocation of this as well. And this is where the Russians are now. And as you can see on Google Maps, you see the fortification line on the road that's coming from the north into Vodiane. And this, I think it's here. This should now be under Russian control as well. No change in overall dynamics here. They have already cut that road a couple of days ago, but obviously every lost fortification is also an issue. And then we have, before we go to the overall situation, we have a map too. That is quite interesting. It shows, or it should probably be the general situation. We see this is a map where satellite pictures were taken to map Ukrainian positions. This would show that there is still a line behind the current front, but this is the last line in front of Pokrovsk. After that, there are only minor fortifications, at least that are mapped, that have been seen. We always don't know if the people that are buying the satellite maps are showing everything or just the parts where they deem it's reasonable. But the rapid Russian advance over the past few weeks obviously made it more difficult for the Ukrainians to establish defensive positions. So while there is still one in the way, the rear area is unclear how much of it is already fortified. If Pokrovsk falls to the Russians, it's unclear where the next Ukrainian lines are, or if there are any. To go to the overall situation, we'll start with Kursk. The Kursk advance of the Ukrainians. We have the New York Times claiming that Russia most likely needs 15 to 20 brigades, at least 50,000 men, to push Ukraine out of Kursk. And they have troops nowhere close to this. 50,000 seems a little overblown to me, where we have Ukrainians of 10,000, maybe 12,000 in the area, but maybe I'm wrong and they are right. This is just the number that they state. I've seen significantly lower numbers as well recently that say like 25,000 they would need to push the Ukrainians out. Obviously then 25,000 might be enough, but it might take much longer than with 50,000. So this is kind of moot to discuss it, as we also would have to discuss supplies, ammunition, etc. If they have a lot more artillery, then fewer troops might be needed, etc., etc. But just to have some kind of ballpark, it would the claims are that the Russians need 50,000 men to push the Ukrainians out here, and they are nowhere close to this. At best, they are somewhere closing in on 20,000 in the area here, and a lot of it is low quality. It's recruits, it's conscripts, etc. to stop the Ukrainians, but nowhere close to having the combat power to push them out. Zelensky talked about the incursion into Kursk himself, and he said it was a spoiling attack, basically a preventive attack to stop the Russians from concentrating their troops, to spoil their intent to invade Sumy. According to Zelensky, the Russians planned to encircle parts of Sumy and take Sumy city, and with the Ukrainian spoiling attack, this was prevented. This is another explanation of the Ukrainians while they did it. Interestingly enough, there's still fear from the Russian side that this wasn't everything. I made a video about it in the past. I'm going to link to it here, where I said that I think there's a real possibility that we have not seen everything in Kursk. I think there is a real possibility of a second offensive by the Ukrainians coming, and you can see that the Russians are also, several bigger Russian mill bloggers are also afraid of this. Among that, the two majors, and Rogozin and Veteran Notes is also one of the bigger Russian mill bloggers. The Russians also, Riba, for instance, was also one of them. They are afraid of the potential for a second invasion, a second offensive of the Ukrainians. Where is obviously the big question, whether it will be towards the south or somewhere else in Russia. Then we have the arrest of Pavel Durov. He was arrested in France for not doing enough moderation on Telegram. And the interesting part is that we have Slatkov here, which is one of the veteran Russian mill bloggers, writing here that it's a disaster because, and that's the funny thing almost, that they are afraid that Durov might be forced to give in certain degrees when it comes to Telegram, and Telegram is necessary for half of the communications in the war zone. This is their acronym for Special Operations Zone. So according to Slatkov, the Russian soldiers need a private company's telecommunication app, Telegram, to communicate, to coordinate their military operations. This is obviously embarrassing to the Russians and shows it, and all the other Russian mill bloggers are concerned as well that the Russian censor might censor Telegram if they fear that Durov does something that is impeding Russian interests, and then obviously the channels with 1 million subscribers or more might lose all of their audience. Then we have a picture that's supposedly showing another Mi-8 being taken down with a drone, and damaged is the claim. I do not think this helicopter would ever fly again, but at the same time there are now claims that this is somewhat unclear. While the yellow area here is blurred, the fact that the red star is positioned at this point seems to not be in line with actual paint jobs. So just to let you know, there are some claims that this video might be doctored. We'll have to see in the future if that turns out to be true. As of now, I do not see conclusive proof that it is doctored, and I have seen Russian mill bloggers claiming that another helicopter was downed, so it's likely true, but as said, there is some doubt. Then we need to talk about Belorussia, because they are concentrating troops, and it's mostly in the Homel region. So north of Kiev, here in the region, the Belarusians are increasing their troop presence. It has started with an exercise, and we heard that in the past that exercises have been used to deploy troops along Ukraine's border in the past by Russia. Now, Ukraine has warned Belorussia that they should retreat their forces to a point where they can't fire into Ukraine, basically warning them. There's also been Russian troop presence in Bryansk, so this could theoretically mean a joint attack from both Belorussia as well as from Russia itself into the south here. But as of now, the troop concentration is not big enough, and while the Belarusians are sending troops, are sending heavy equipment, tanks, artillery, etc., while there's even claim that Wagner forces have come there, the forces itself are nowhere close to the strengths. And even more important, the Belarusian army is a mobilization army. In peacetime, their units only have 30 to 40% in strength. They are meant to be filled up after a mobilization, and that mobilization has not happened yet. Ukraine, on the other hand, has heavily fortified the border, has mined it, and they are facing Belarusians that have not taken the lessons of the war yet. Their equipment is not adjusted to the threat now by FPV drones, etc. So in this regard, the military threat is probably limited to this point. The fact that they haven't mobilized doesn't mean that they can't cross the border. They obviously can with just the regular strength of it, but this would leave them much exposed, and the strength overall is not big enough to seriously threaten Ukraine. All of this can change, but as of now, the threat to Ukraine is limited. The worst that can happen right now is probably limited border incursions, but a massive new strike towards Kiev seems unlikely. It seems more likely that the Russians have asked the Belarusians to concentrate forces here to divert Ukrainians, to force the Ukrainians to redeploy reserves here, just in case, while those reserves can neither be used in the Donbas nor in a potential other invasion or operation. Then we talk about troop generations, and here we have an advertisement that the Russians say they are going to create a BARS Kursk unit. Now, BARS is the reserve, the volunteer reserve for the Russian armed forces. So this is a volunteer unit in context with the Russians, with the Russian armed forces, and they are meant to fight the Ukrainians in Kursk, and in Kursk alone. The salary would be like a normal participant in the war, and it would be limited to 6 months and limited to Kursk. The thing is, what Astra writes here, and Astra is independent, as noted by the 7x7 publication, which drew attention to the advertisement, Vladimir Putin's decree on mobilization is still in effect in Russia, according to which it is impossible to terminate a contract with the Russian army at this time. It will be extended automatically. So if they sign up, they might find out that while they have signed up for something, the reality might be very different. Then we have troop generation for Ukraine. Poland is saying they already trained 23,000 Ukrainian soldiers. This is Obviously, good news for Ukraine, where they get well-trained soldiers from a NATO country that will help the Ukrainian goals. And before we finish, on my German channel, I make significantly more videos than on the English one, but a lot of them are scripted, which means I want to deep dive into another topic where I need a script, and I'm very bad at reading from script. I am somewhat troubled with this. I'm far better just having bullet points and talking freely about it. This in the past, I think I just made 1 or 2 attempts which weren't that successful because being forced to read it in English, to read at first and then to read in English causes trouble to me. So I tried now with an AI translation of my own voice. I think it's fairly okay. It has trouble mentioning the numbers. It has trouble mentioning the month, but this might be fixed in the future. Just in case you want to know how it could be, I'm going to put the link in the description. It's hidden, so it's not being published, but with the link you can see it. You can check it out and let me know what you think about it. Would you prefer having those videos to not having them? Because that's in the end the question. I don't have the time, and the channel here isn't popular enough that it makes sense to invest an insane amount of time and effort to make a smooth video for the audience that in majority doesn't even appreciate it, because they are not used to me reading from a script, whereas an AI translation might just check all the boxes and deliver them something that they would have a value from. So if you're interested, check the link in the description. I'll link to that video that I uploaded. As said, it's a test and it has some trouble with the numbers, but let me know if you would like to rather have these videos than not have them at all, because those are realistically the 2 options. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. If you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, and leave your comment. What do you think about the current developments in the comment section? This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.